This week on the Stereo Image, we're lucky enough to have the great Joe Alterman joining us. One of my favorite young piano players, because now I'm old. But man, and a lot of hair, really good hair, which I like in a piano player. Man, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a treat to meet you and chat with you. I love what you do. It's just a treat to be here,
Thanks.
really.
I've been seeing you around, playing Mesro, and I mean, I'm, just like aware of your playing, and everything I've heard. You give me hope. I mean, I'm assuming that you're probably. I'm guessing going out on a limb here because I don't know how old you are, but I assuming you're in your 30s.
Yeah, I'm 37.
37. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're you're now like two generations back from me.
Mm,
I think of I mean, Benny Green's like my generation,
mm,
and then, like, 15 years ago, all these young cats came out that were really, really hot players, but
mm,
the fact that what you're doing is so, it harkens back to when music was, like, full of joy and fun and
mm,
swinging hard and all I mean, again, I'm assuming stuff, but from what I hear in your playing, it's
mm.
you're not an angry young jazz musician out to prove a point. You're just playing the shit out of the piano because you're good and you love doing it.
No, thank you. And then you're spot on. I mean, for me, it was kind of like my dad would grill steaks when I was younger. We'd have a barbecue and he'd put on some Wes Montgomery or some Oscar Peterson.
Nice.
And for me, it was just, I noticed at the minute that the music started, how much everything started to elevate. Just the feeling, it
Right.
just always like jazz was always this happy place for
Mhm.
me in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And it wasn't really until I got to school that I realized so many people in my age really think of never heard jazz outside of like a pretty academic setting. So, and I rarely heard it in like a academic setting, truthfully.
Right. Wow. Well, that's another thing. I mean, I can go off on a tangent here, but I say this to like guys. I mean, you're lucky enough not only to uh, have had an association with Les McCann and people like that. That era. I always
Mm,
say that we're sort of the last gasp of musicians that got to experience the guys that did it when it was the popular
mm,
music of the day. The
mm,
innovators, the guys that really started playing the music that speaks to us. And,
mm,
kids younger than you are really only exposed to it in an academic setting in terms of you're not getting to the people that I mean, I say it all the time, but I got lucky enough to be hanging with Jerry Mulligan and Clark Terry and Phil Woods
mm,
and, played with a lot with Herb Pomeroy, who played with Bird.
mm,
Oh, and I mean, that kind of direct, learning from those guys and hearing their life experiences and all that stuff, that now when a kid that's maybe 10 now goes into jazz, they're going to be studying it the way we studied Bach, or
totally.
Beethoven. It's, I mean, there's video and there's, record albums, but that kind of one-on-one personal connection with, hanging out at Oscar Peterson's house and hearing him play and just
Wow.
looking at his hands and talking and getting, all those things.
Mm.
I never take any of that for granted. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, I would I'm going on and on because
No, it's
I'm jacked
awesome.
up.
I love it.
But
Yeah, I
I
love it.
but, it was to be I did in the '90s, I did a bunch of the precursor to the jazz cruise. It was
Mm,
called the Floating Jazz Festival that Hank O'Neill produced, and I was recording for
mm,
his label. And I mean, it really was, you know, 6 sets of music a night for
mm,
like 2 weeks, and you're like, "Well, do I wanna go see, Eddie Higgins play solo piano tonight, or do I wanna go see Tommy Flanagan with his trio, or do I wanna go see, Herb Ellis and the 3 Sounds,
mm.
or do I wanna go see Jerry Mulligan's group?" And it was all scheduled brilliantly, so you never missed anything. I'm talking way too much shit about myself because I
That's
wanna get to you,
amazing. I love hearing it.
but I did this cruise '99, I think it was, on the QE2, and it was a tribute to Oscar. And actually was a tribute to Clark Terry, but Oscar was on it, and,
Mm.
so I sit down to play, and I'm playing solo shit, the first night, and I look, and Oscar's sitting next to me, and next to him is Tommy Flanagan, and next to him is Shirley Horn, and next to Shirley Horn is Monty, and next to Monty is Kenny Drew Jr., and next to Kenny Drew Jr. is Bill Charlap, and next to Bill Charlap is Ted Rosenthal, and I mean, and I looked at and I said, "No, fuck this, I'm not playing in front of you people," and I got up
I
and
was
walked
about to
away,
ask.
uh, but, it was, I mean, but that kind of sort of camaraderie and that kind of I'm sure you've had this exact same thing, but they're nice to people. They're
Mhm.
young musicians aren't a threat to them. They wanna share with them and tell them
Mm.
things that are important to them, and I mean, I was so lucky to be around all that, and it seems like you've got at
Mm.
least some of that too going on.
Man, well, I've been very lucky as well. I'm jealous hearing, like, so
Well,
much of that, but I've been very lucky my own,
uh-huh.
way. You just when you mentioned, Herb Pomeroy playing with Charlie Parker, it just reminded me of I went to NYU, and so I'd be in school all day learning all this stuff, and then I'd go hear the people, and I remember one night going to hear, Hank Jones, and you mentioned people who were kind. Every time he didn't know who I was, but I showed up to all of his gigs and was always there and asking him questions, and I felt like every time it came to the point of the conversation where I would, feel like I should say, "Well, thanks for talking to me. Thanks, have a good night." He would
Yeah.
say, "So what are you practicing these days?" or whatever. And I remember
Wow.
getting the chills one night because I asked him about Charlie Parker, and he said, "Oh, Charles, he was a great player, like great young player," or something like that. And it occurred to me he called him Charles because he was older than Charlie Parker, and he
Wow,
still
yeah.
saw him as like a great young sax player that came
Sure, sure.
along.
Up
I
and
mean,
coming.
just that, yeah, just that kind of stuff. But it was
Wow.
also really amazing to be in school and to be, learning the music, but also to be talking to people like Les on the phone. I remember, like, Les McCann, he was just I don't know if you ever got to spend any time with him, but like he was just I used to call him like he was like a child, like a baby and the Dalai Lama all in one. He had like this childlike wonder. He had like the most outrageous, hilarious sense of humor, but
Mhm.
he had a really strong mind, and he was, full of wisdom and stuff. And I remember shortly after we met, I was in school and I had like some assignment that was like, it was like, here's 8 bars of some chords, put a melody to these chords, write a melody. And I remember the melody that I wanted to write, some of the one note clashed with the chord or something, but I liked the note, and I called Les and I was like, what do I do? Like, this is a project, I'll get some points off or whatever. But the note clashes, but I like the note. And he said, "Man, you gotta go work on a farm for a little while." He was just, he was always kind of, yeah, he was always encouraging me to like trust me. I mean, I
Right.
had some really great teachers, but I also had teachers who, because I mean, I love what you do. And I'm sure you've dealt with this. Like, I mean, I loved, like, when I got to college, I was obsessed with like Red Garland and Les and Ramsey and Errol Garner. And a lot of times I had a lot of teachers who would, I love playing block chords, who would say things like, "Well, that's some good stuff, but like the more you develop, the more you're going to get away from Red and into Herbie." And it was always kind of like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with Red?
What's wrong? Right, exactly. No, I mean, when I went to Berkeley, it was, I was obviously a huge Oscar fan, and I was all of those guys that you just mentioned, and Monty, and all those people, Teddy Wilson, Tatum,
Mm,
those were the guys that spoke to me. And I grew up with two player pianos in my house, so
mm,
I was like, this idea of the entire piano being played was,
mm,
so I would transcribe Wynton Kelly's stuff, and, it was astounding, but
mm,
where was the support from the low end,
mm,
that I grew up listening to with Fats Waller and those guys?
mm,
And, it was the same thing. It was like, "Oh, you gotta listen to Herbie and Chick, and you gotta listen to Keith Jarrett," and I loved all of them, and I could do a
mhm,
decent Herbie and Chick impersonation, but it wasn't the kind of
mhm.
music that I ever wanted to play. Well,
Right.
it just didn't kick me in the gut the way any like super hard and I mean, they all swing in their own way too, but that kind of a concept of swing that came in like heavily post bop, is a different feel altogether than,
Mhm.
you know, Sid Catlett and Philly,
Right.
Joe Jones, and all the guys that just laid it down, you know, I mean, I'm simple and I like
Mhm.
4 beats in a measure, you know what I mean?
Me too.
And, you know, there were guys that could do everything at
Mhm.
Berkeley, but I mean, the stuff that I put on when I'm at home listening to music
Mhm.
is I mean, I can appreciate new younger guys and like Sullivan. I mean,
Mhm.
the genius is there and I can appreciate it. But when I really
Mhm.
wanna lay back and just fucking relax, I'll put on Encores and Hi-Fi, you know, or a
Yeah.
Runner, you know, one of those things that just swings till it hurts, you know?
Yeah, and, you know yeah, and for me, a lot of that stuff true, like, too, what when I listen to Errol or Ed Garland or any of the people we're talking about is especially when I was younger and I just gravitated toward the feeling in the music before I really knew anything about the music, I didn't know a lot of
Right,
songs, so for me, it was like they all played so melodically in such a way that you could sing everything that, like, everything would get stuck in my head. I didn't know what's the melody and what's the solo, and I loved
right.
that I could just sing everything, and there are oftentimes now and you know, similar to you, I enjoy the stuff when they said, "You'll put Red down, you'll get into Herbie," or
Yeah,
whatever, and
yeah.
I enjoy Herbie, I listen to him a good bit, but I don't it's not the same thing, I hear the melody and then
No.
the solo goes somewhere else. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not the singable
I understand.
thing
Yeah, I mean,
to
we
me.
can, you know, we can appreciate the genius, you know, and I mean, you put on Herbie's solo album, The Piano, which is, you know, which was super rare when I was in
Mhm.
school and you had to get it from Japan. And it's tear inducing. Some of the playing is
Right.
so beautiful. But, you
Mhm.
know, again, give me Monty, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Give John Clayton or Ray Brown and
Mhm.
Jeff Hamilton and, you know, and just let it just beat me to death, you know? It's so hip.
Mhm.
And I don't think that'll ever get old. You know, there'll be guys younger than us that still appreciate that.
Mhm.
But dude, you talked about a lot of how did you come to meet Les? How did
Yeah.
that happen?
Well, I got really lucky. So basically, so I grew up in Atlanta, and I asked my parents
Mhm.
for lessons when I was really young, like 4 or 5, and I
Uh-huh.
took a few. I didn't like it, and I wanted to quit, but they would let me. So from like 4 or 5 to 11 or 12, I was taking classical lessons and just always
Right.
getting in trouble for changing notes and stuff. And I didn't know that was improvising or anything at the time. I didn't, but I got really into bluegrass music actually, and
Okay.
it was really through bluegrass music and hearing people like Oscar Peterson play "You Are My Sunshine," like a song that I would normally hear at a bluegrass festival, hearing these guys, interpret songs that I'm used to hearing bluegrass people play, that I was drawn back to the piano and into jazz. Oscar was really like the first person that I fell in love with. He like got me back into the piano, and then I heard Ahmad Jamal and I just like fell in love with, the music. Then I heard
Mhm.
Les and it was kind of like the same country thing. It was like the blues thing, but it was even a little more country. It really resonated with me. And I remember, my teachers were all telling me, don't do this, don't do this. And I could tell he was doing all those things. So even before we met, you know, he kind of gave me some confidence because he was doing a lot of things the teachers told me not to do, and he sounded so good. Like I loved his group with Leroy Vinegar and Ron Jefferson, the Les
Right. Yeah,
McCann
yeah.
Limited. And so
Yeah.
anyway, I moved to New York and eventually was asked to open for him at the Blue Note, which was great, just by the people at the Blue Note,
Wow.
that ran the club. Yeah, I worked there in the office for many years as just a student
Yeah, that's
intern.
what I was gonna ask. We skipped over the going to New York part, but we'll go back to that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but,
Well, no,
I w you just knew that that was the place you had to be as a teenager when getting out of high school, or what happened?
well, I was always like, leaving lunch in high school to go to the room and play the piano and things like I was always like
Mhm.
this was always my favorite thing. And I knew I wanted to go somewhere where I could hear the music. Like I remember sitting in like history class in high school and just like going on my computer and looking up, oh my God, I'm missing this in New York right now. And like every week I knew what was happening every week, but I was never there.
Right.
And so I wanted to get there, but I also I wasn't sure what I was gonna do. So I luckily got into NYU where I could study a few different things, and obviously music was my favorite thing. But
Right, sure, yeah.
yeah, but I realized very early on that like it's not just about playing well to get gigs. It was like you got to know people. It was like a business, I forgot about the second word in the phrase music business. So
Right.
And I got this job just working at the Blue Note, and it was great. I mean, like my first day, they're like, "Can you do us a favor? Just go keep McCoy Tyner company for 2 hours." And you know, and it was amazing. He took me down to the
No,
piano, and he was obsessed with Hank Jones. He did a Hank Jones impersonation for me on the piano. It was incredible.
wow. Wow.
Yeah. And
Obviously, Coy is such a strong voice on the instrument. You don't think of people like that having other heroes that they're obsessed with.
right. You know, I was in when I was in college, I was in an ensemble that Joe Lovano led, and he
Sure.
told me that he had been on the road with McCoy. This was like 2013 maybe. Maybe it was before it was maybe a 2011, 2013, something like that. And he had been on the road with McCoy and they ran into Hank, and he said that McCoy was kind of like visibly a little nervous talking to Hank,
Uh,
like still, and he was, they were both old men at that point. But yeah, we showed McCoy one time. He that was right when YouTube was kind of becoming a thing, and he came
mhm.
up to the office one day and he said, "Show me YouTube. I didn't know about it." So we showed him a little bit of Zachariah, the film where Elvin Jones plays a
Yeah.
cowboy, and he
Yeah.
hadn't
Yep.
seen it. He freaked out. It was hilarious. And then we showed him a video of him playing Giant Step solo piano in like the 80s, just killing it. And we finished the video and he looked at us and he says, "I guess I ate my Wheaties that morning."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. But
Yeah.
yeah, we
Basically, through working there, they got to know me and my music, and I kept getting opportunities to open for people who they thought that person might like my music. And the first person I opened for was like John Pizzarelli. I got to open for Hiromi, and Ahmad Jamal came out, and it scared the you know what out of me. And
sure.
yeah, and then I opened for Les, and I was obsessed with Les during this period. I like only listened to him. I was so excited. I was sound checking when he came in the club. He was in a wheelchair, and they wheeled him up to the stage. I was so excited to meet him, but he didn't say hello. He literally his first words to me were "Play me some blues, boy," like really intimidatingly. And I was like, "Oh man," I was really nervous, and I did my best. After a minute, he said, "Amen." So I knew I was doing something okay. Then he said, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Joe Alterman." He's like, "Alterman? Are you a rabbi?" And I was like, "No, I'm not a rabbi." And he said, "Well, you a Hebrew?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, from now on, you're my Hebrew." And that was it. We talked every day just about for the next 12 years until he passed
No
away.
kidding.
We had the greatest friendship.
That's
It
so great. Wow.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
Huh.
he told
Man.
me, like he mentioned, I just got to share what this real quick.
Sure.
I told him about because basically Ahmad came to see me and just when I opened for Hiromi, and he was sitting right near the piano. I was very
Right.
nervous playing in front of him, and I told him, I don't think it went badly, but I didn't walk away feeling like I had, I had
Killed
let
it.
it,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I let it kinda scare me a little bit, and I told, Les about that, and he said, he had a similar story that he wanted to share with me. He had been the same age just about, and he was playing his first big gig in Chicago at the London House. He said he's about to go on stage, like, super excited, super confident, and he looks out in the audience and he sees Oscar Peterson sitting down to take a seat, and he was like, "Shit," So he said he went over to Oscar's table, he's like, "Oscar, I love you, but I cannot play in front of you." And he said that in response, Oscar said something that changed his life. He said, "Les, I didn't come here to hear me. I came here to hear you." And that kind of made Les feel like from then on, he had like permission to be himself. He also told me that Oscar, I know, had a stroke that kind of hurt his left hand.
Yeah.
Les
Yeah.
had a stroke that knocked out his right hand. Les told me that when he was in the hospital recovering, Oscar called him and said, "When you're better, let's go on the road as one piano player." Just joking.
That's
That's so
great.
funny. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Sorry, there's a lot there.
no, that's keep going. I mean, this is wonderful stuff. But well, hear a lot of Ahmad's playing and you're playing.
Mm,
Those kind of long lines that just float over everything. It's
mm.
really hip. And did you get to know him at all? I mean, besides just pleasantries? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a few really amazing experiences with him. Well, first, I got to interview him for basically when you become a senior at NYU, you're supposed to interview some musician, and
Mhm.
I just was like, "I'll try." And I called Ahmad's office, and they set it up, and we had this great chat, and
Mhm.
I remember about 2 weeks later. I was upstairs in the office at the Blue Note, and someone in the office came up to me and was like, "Hey, Joe, Ahmad Jamal's downstairs to see this show." And so I went downstairs all nervous and prepared to say something like, "Hey, Mr. Jamal, I'm Joe Alterman, that student that you interviewed with the other." And before I could say anything, Ahmad said something. He goes, "Joe Alterman, how we do on our paper?" And I was shocked that he even recognized me because we hadn't. And he said, "I've been checking you out," and we had this
Nice.
great chat. And basically, I was a volunteer every year when I was in New York at the National Endowment for the Arts, the Jazz Masters Awards. And
For sure.
so I would go there, it'd be a great day, and they'd always ask you, who you want to be assigned to if you're gonna help out specific people, and I would always request a mod. And
Mhm.
so I think it was the same year I was kinda helping him out, and I remember we said goodbye at the end of the night, and I turned around, I walked away, and then I could feel a tap on my shoulder a few seconds later, and it was Ahmad, and he kinda, like, grabbed me by the collar, and he, like, looked at me, and he's like, "Keep your enthusiasm, it's necessary." And I was like,
Wow.
"What?" And I didn't really understand what that meant at the time, honestly, and I remember I was kinda like, I went to a gig a few weeks later. I remember I was in a bad mood, and I remember this lady who always drove me nuts kinda was at the gig and wanted to talk about something that we'd already talked about probably, and, instead of, and I just said, "Fake your enthusiasm in this moment." I did that, we had a nice chat, and I ended up getting, like, 12 gigs or something from that conversation. So I was like, "There's
Wow.
something here." Coincidentally, a few weeks later, I got an email out of the blue from Ahmad that said, "Subject enthusiasm," and he just sent me a note. And so for the next few years, every once in a while, I'd have some question that I'd email him about, and it could relate for, anything from, I remember writing him and saying, like, I feel like my technique's getting better, but it's getting in the way of the music. Like, how do you balance having good technique with making good music? And he wrote me this
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful response. I'm happy to share with you. And then like other times, like I had a girlfriend, and being playing these kinds of songs. Like I always grew up kind of wanting the thing that was in the song. But
For
then I
sure.
met this girl, and I thought, well, I don't feel any of the things in these songs, but I must be feeling what love really is. And then I realized I don't think something's wrong here. And I remember emailing Ahmad and just asked him, told him what's going on. And he just wrote me back and he said, like, you need to sit quietly for 10 minutes and ask yourself over and over again if she's a muse or a distraction. And it was
Wow.
like, whoa, we broke up the next day. Like, yeah. But the one experience, so Ahmad had a godson. His name is Zayn Muhammad, and he lives in London now, but he's a great guitar player. He plays kind of a lot of fusion kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
Ahmad wanted to go see him play one night. So he invited me to come with him. And the weirdest thing, it was so surreal, was that we were sitting together, listening to the music together, and we had the same reactions at the same moments to everything. It was bizarre.
Really?
Like he
Wow.
would laugh at the same thing I would, and the people sitting with us were like, "What's going on?" It was just really interesting because his music's like the music really that made me really want to get into this, and I really resonated with what he did. And then listening to music with him, we reacted the same way to everything. It was just kind of bizarre.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
That's
man,
no, that's I mean, but yeah, that's sort of shared experience of it's like when I hear someone like you and I know that you listen to all the same records that I listen to. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And it's like these guys that I just did a record with Alex Frank and Graham Dector,
Ooh.
and they are they're like, "Oh, man, the Pole Winners record, that the 3rd cut on the Pole Winners record, isn't it?" Or the Sonny Rollins, whatever, every
Mhm.
reference they're pulling out, they grew up listening to this stuff that I grew up listening to, all the
Mm,
LPs that I had before I got CD versions of them, and all the Blue Note stuff, and
mm,
all the and you can't that kind of so the first time we played together was like we've been playing together for 20
wow.
years.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
'cause I knew what Graham was thinking in terms of, you
Mm,
know, where his head was at, and Alex just is so, deep into Ray and John
mm,
Clayton and all those guys that it's like I've played with a lot of different I'm sure you do. You
mm,
play with a million bass players and drummers, and they're all good, but they're all good in different ways, and when you find somebody that just plays exactly what you've been hearing your whole life, and what you expect it to sound like, and what expect it to play like,
mm.
so, it's you can just relax and dig in and play whatever you want. you know,
Yeah.
without
No, I travel around a lot and play with local rhythm sections, and I often,
Mhm.
when I finding the people, I kinda reach out to someone in that town that I know, and they kinda connect me with a drummer, a bass player, and then I find that guy and then ask, "Who do you like to play with?" I we never rehearse, and
No, I
after
mean
people say something like people are always like, "Man, it sounds like y'all must have rehearsed a lot." I'm like, "No, no, no, we really
yeah,
just listen to the same stuff for our whole life." That's pretty much
right,
all.
right, and I mean, it's when I first started playing, at the Green Mill, I played there, like, once a year in Chicago, and,
Mm.
and the first time I played there, there's a great jazz writer, named Neil Tesser. I don't know if you know that name, but,
Do, yeah.
he had a radio show in Chicago for years and years, and he was, he
Mm.
wrote for Jazz Times and all those magazines. Anyway,
Mhm.
he wrote the Playboy Guide to Jazz and,
Mm.
really, really, he's won a Grammy for his liner notes, a real heavy
Wow.
guy, and, so anyways, he said, "You gotta play the Green Mill," and I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And then sure enough, a couple weeks later, this guy calls me. He goes, "Yeah, Jones, this is Gemolo. I own the mill. You want to play here?" And so I said, "Sure." And I didn't know who to play with, because I
Mm.
didn't know the guys in Chicago. And so I just asked Neil, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Larry Gray'd be great for you." And
Wow.
we got this drummer. But I wound up I used him for a few years, and he was a wonderful guy, but then I
Mhm.
met this guy, Eric Monska, who was
Mm.
playing for Patricia Barber at the time, and,
Wow.
he is a master fucking drummer. I mean, there's another guy in
Mm.
Chicago that everybody knows, and I can't think of his name right now off the top.
George Flutis, maybe?
George Flutis, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and I have not played with him because Eric's always been available for the gig,
Mm.
but George,
Wow.
I know him, through reputation, and we met a couple times, and I'd love to play with him, but Eric Monska is the
Yeah.
fucking shit. I mean, he's a monster, and,
Wow.
so I go in there, once a year, and it's like
Mhm.
old home week. I mean, I played with a bass player
Mm.
named Kelly Sill for years, who was like sort of the guy. He was the house bass player at the Showcase for years and years and years, played with
Mm.
everybody you can imagine, and
Wow.
unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago,
Mm.
but but again, it's like putting on a comfortable pair of shoes, or socks.
Yeah.
You're just like, "Oh, yeah, this is hip," you know?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
but I was gonna ask you, do you have, like, a working group that, like, that you take on the you don't obviously, you don't take on the road, but,
I don't
uh
really. I mean, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I have guys in the, different areas of the country. Like in Atlanta in the Southeast, I have the people that I call first pretty much.
right,
And then
right.
and same with in the New York area, up northeast, I guess. But yeah, I really have mostly just, I mean, sometimes I'll get certain requests to bring a certain group from like an album or something,
Right,
but for the
right.
most part, I just go around and meet people and do it like and it
That's
works.
it
I love
works,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I could tell you a story that didn't work once. I played a town that shall remain nameless, not to hurt anybody, but I knew the drummer on the gig I knew him by reputation, and I knew that he was competent.
Mhm.
But again, you go to Berkeley and, yeah, I mean, I came to Vegas and it was like, I'm hearing guys playing gigs that, couldn't have gotten arrested in Boston,
Mm.
but they got a gig, because the rest of the country isn't that music specific,
Right, right.
and so I used this drummer who booked the gig, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll bring you in, and I'm getting this bass player, and he's really heavy, and as a matter of fact, his claim to fame was that he did a record with Hank Jones, this bass player,
Mm,
except that it was a vanity project that Hank probably did out of, being nice.
mm. Yeah.
But anyways, so I show up and the bass I'm just telling shit stories about this is like piano nerd
It's
heaven here.
great. I love this stuff, yeah.
So I show up for the gig, right? And the bass
Mhm.
player's like taking his case off his bass and he looks at the bass in front of me and he goes, "Man, first thing I've touched this thing in 2 years." And I looked at him and I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I mostly
What?
play electric." And so I say, "Well, I gotta see what's going on," right? So I
Yeah.
call, I think I called, I forget the first tune. This guy, so I probably called Swanderful, right? Because
Mm,
I used to play with all these guys, in Boston. I had this gig in Boston at the Colonnade Hotel, and it was 2
Mm.
weeks at a time of a guest artist.
Wow.
So, it would be 2 weeks with Scott Hamilton, 2 weeks with Clark Terry, 2 weeks with, all these guys would come in, and so I got to learn how to accompany people because Herb wanted
Wow.
different voicings than Dick Johnson wanted, you know what I mean? And
Mm,
and
yeah.
and, I got to play with a guy named Tom Lindsay. I'm sure you don't know that name, but
No, I
Tom
don't.
Lindsay was the trumpet player on Body and Soul by Coleman Hawkins.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Whoa.
yes. He was a great trumpet player, and he was, like, in his
Mm.
80s at the time, 70s or 80s,
Wow.
because it was
Hmm.
1939 was Body and Soul,
Yeah.
and I was playing with him in the late 80s.
Wow.
So, I got it, that was my real education after Berkeley was having these
Mhm.
gigs and playing with everybody, and,
Mhm.
uh, anyhow, I forget oh,
Oh, the
so this
drummer.
guy, Mike Monaghan, who was a tenor player, a Barry
Mm.
player, really great, played for Boston Pops Jazz
Mm.
Ensemble, really heavy player, real nice.
Mm.
And every gig, he would just say, I always call "Wonderful" as the first tune because everybody fucking knows it, and it's not a discussion on the stand about what are we gonna play first, what do you wanna do?
Yeah.
So I called "Wonderful" with this bass player, with this group, and I called it a little up because I wanted to see if this guy could hang,
Mhm.
and so I went 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, da, 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 right, and like there,
Mm.
and and it literally was he got the E flat out, and then he fell apart, and I said, "Okay," after the first 2, I go, "You know what? You can go back. We're sort of done tonight. I'm just gonna wing it with my left hand." He goes, "What are you talking about?
Man.
I drove all the way here from from this place." He says, "Well, can you give me an extra $50 for gas?" I paid him like 350 for the gig, which was,
Oh my
20 years ago
gosh, yeah.
was a good money, right? And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, "No, I am not giving you $50 for gas, and you can have your CD back." You know? And, but so that was, like, when I learned you gotta really, like, vet somebody through and I mean, it's easy now
Yeah,
because you can just go on the internet and find out, but
good
20 years
point.
ago, that didn't exist, and you were going
That's a
by
good
word of
point.
mouth a lot, you know?
Mm,
And,
yeah.
and so, and then, of course, the drummer who booked me for the gig is like, "Oh, man, I'm really sorry. I thought he was good. Everybody told me he was good." I said, "You never played with him before?" He said, "No." Ways, yeah. The other thing is but to go back to what you do, what you're doing
Mhm,
mostly, and what I do a lot too when I do that, is
mhm,
there are great musicians in almost every town, you know?
mhm.
I mean, there's monster players that, for reasons of their own aren't out touring or they're deeply ensconced in education and they're but they can play and
Oh,
you
yeah.
can find them,
Oh,
but,
yeah. Man, can I share one that just reminded me of a great story that I think you'll like if you don't mind. The night I met Houston Person, who I love,
yeah,
I grew up, like, just playing along with some of his recordings, like, so excited to hopefully meet him one day, and he came to NYU and gave a master class, but I was, like, one of the only students that was, like, super excited about it. Most of my peers were really, really
right.
modern,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
whatever.
sure.
And so Houston walked in the room and he said, "Who wants to play blues?" And like everyone stood up. And so there's like I'm playing the piano, there's like a rhythm section and like 15 tenor players in line to like take a chorus on a blues. And
Right.
Houston's like, "How's the key of an F?" And everyone's like, "Oh, great," thinking they're going to show off or something. And then Houston goes, "Ready?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "One, two." He called the slowest blues and no one could get through like 4 bars. It was the greatest
Right.
lesson.
That's so good.
Man,
Yeah, Oscar had that same thing. He would say,
really?
if you can, he would always make somebody play a blues really slowly and see if they could
Wow.
hang.
I saw one of Oscar's last performances, and I had a very interesting experience with him. I'd love to share that with you if you it was so I grew up, growing up in Atlanta, I saw that he was playing. I was like a senior in high school. I saw he was playing at Birdland and
Uh-huh.
begged my dad to go. We got tickets. It was like a high school graduation gift. And we got there. And I really think it was he may have done 2 gigs after that. But we were sitting like right next to the piano, so close, the seat like right there. And
Right.
I could hear his grunts, and I could
Right.
tell that
Sure.
often the things he was grunting, he wasn't playing. He was getting especially the ends of phrases, and he was getting pretty
Yeah.
frustrated with himself.
Yeah.
but it was really a great show. The ballads were especially powerful. Anyway, at the end of the night, I went up to Johnny, the owner of the club, who I did not know at the time. I was a 16-year-old, and he was like, and I was like, "Oscar's my hero. Can I meet him?" And he said, "Sure." And he took me back, and I was so nervous, and finally got up to him, and I said, like, "Mr. Peterson, you're my hero. Me and my dad, we flew up from Atlanta to see you." And he looked at me like really sad, and he was like, "Oh, you flew up for this?" And I was like,
Oh, god.
"You were great, Oscar Peterson." Like, it's the
Yeah,
weirdest
yeah,
position to be in, you know?
well, it's
And he
yeah,
really was.
right, right. No, I mean, it's so I grew up, listening to him and I've told it before, but it's I was in Buffalo, and I was playing a gig with the drummer for the Buffalo Philharmonic, like
Mm,
a jazz gig, and he said, "You should come to the rehearsal, Oscar's coming," and I said, "Well, yeah, I know, we're going to see the show." He said, "No, no, you should come to the sound check and the rehearsal this afternoon."
wow.
And so it was I think it was like 1980, maybe 81, and,
Mm,
he had just taken delivery of his Bosendorfer,
mhm,
and instead of sending it to Toronto, they sent it to Buffalo. So it was his
mm,
first time playing the piano at this sound check. So the sound check, I'm up on stage with Oscar, and he's like, "Play something for me." And I played for him, and he said, "You should go to Berkeley." And he had a guy named Whit Brown and, Alan Dawson was playing drums.
yeah.
And,
Whoa.
Whit Brown was playing bass, who we taught at Berkeley, and he said, "These guys both teach at Berkeley." So the next day, I
Mm,
sent away for a Berkeley catalog and went there the next semester. Um,
whoa.
but so anyways, flash forward to '99, I'm doing this cruise, and Oscar's on it with Ulf and, Nils and Martin Drew, and it was post-stroke.
Mm,
So maybe it was 2001. I don't remember when he had the stroke. But anyways, he he played twice.
mm,
And I got to hang with him a lot, and we hadn't seen each other in quite a while, and we were very friendly.
mm.
And it's really funny because I don't know if you know his daughter Celine,
I
but
do. Yeah.
Celine was like 6 or 7 at the time, and we were hanging out. Anyways, one night he was playing really well, and then another night he wasn't playing really well. And he said, "Well,
Mm,
I have good nights and bad nights." But
mm,
I stood in that room, the I'm trying to think of the word because I don't wanna be disparaging, but the people that don't get it would say, "Why didn't he hang it up when he
mm.
wasn't playing at the peak?" I mean, he was the most excellent pianist in history for 50
Yeah.
years. No, never a note out of place, and they would
Mm,
say, why would he go out there? And
mm,
standing in that room with tears streaming down my face watching him play and the adulation
mm.
that he was getting, you know exactly why he was out there. He still had a lot more to say, and some of the you said some of the ballads were incredibly moving.
They really were.
And, um, and you had Ulf playing, like, Oscar's lines on the guitar, which was insane. I'd never heard a guitar player play so much of a
Mm,
keyboard style on the guitar, I mean, you know,
fascinating.
that kinda, like, the chromatic stuff of, that is not conducive to guitar playing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Playing like I mean, just I'm just pulling this off the top of my head, but, like, you know how you would play like a C, you hit a C and then like an E flat, an E, with the other 2 fingers, like, in a G,
Mhm.
so for a C chord, but you'll go like, you'll play the C and then slide down from the E flat to the E for the in the G to go to
Yeah,
G,
yeah.
and he was doing that on the guitar,
That's
like,
wild. Wow.
flawlessly, and it was amazing because, I mean, this is again 25 years
Mm,
ago, but every time I would walk down a hallway on the ship, there was Ulf with his guitar unplugged sitting there shedding. I mean, he never stopped, and he is a monster player, but to adapt, it's like he read Oscar's transcriptions and adapted
wow.
that to guitar, and it was
That's
really an
incredible.
he doesn't get enough credit for that stuff.
Totally.
Anyways, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
I don't
it's,
think
so
Oscar gets enough credit for his, ballad compositions. I just wanted to
well,
say real quick.
and as
Yeah.
the other thing, yeah, I agree. But all of that stuff, I mean, Ray talked about it all the time, like him and
Mm,
Herb just playing hour after hour every afternoon. And Oscar, they would rehearse like Oscar could say like one of their tunes, whatever. I mean, any tune that he played with that trio. Um, uh, they would they'd say like, okay, it starts in B flat, then After 2 choruses, we go up to D. Then we play a chorus in E flat. Then we
Mhm.
go to A flat. Then we go to E natural. Then we finish up
Jeez.
in G, right? Oscar would get to the gig, they would rehearse that whole thing, and Oscar would get to gig, and he would start it on F sharp. And they would do all the same key changes throughout the
Oh my
tune, but
gosh.
transpose
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, and he said he would
Wow.
do that with them all the time just to fuck with them, you know?
Well,
So
that's
that group was so tight and so heavy, and, I mean,
mm,
it's like, first time I played with Herb Pomeroy, I've told this story before, and I will tell this story till the day I die because it's a life lesson and it's really
mm,
great. So I'm playing with Herb Pomeroy and I'm scared shitless because I took Herb's line writing class at
oh,
Berkeley and I took his arranging in the style of Duke Ellington and I played in the recording band at Berkeley, but I never
mm,
played with Herb Pomeroy. So I'm out of Berkeley and I'm got this gig and it's 2 weeks at the Colonnade with Herb Pomeroy. And I don't know if you know the bass player, Marshall Wood.
I
But
know the
Marshall
name.
played bass for Tony Bennett for the last 20 years. So anyways, we're playing and Herb's calling all these tunes that I was familiar with, but struggling through on some of them like UMMG and, some of the
Mm,
Billy Strayhorn stuff because he was a big Duke guy. And it
mm,
wasn't stuff that I had under my fingers like I did, exactly like you. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I had Marshall there to say, yeah, yeah, it goes to sharp 4 at the bridge, and stuff like
mm,
that. So I would play through the head with him, and then he would say, "First solo, you take the first solo, Mikey."
mm,
And so I'd struggle through 2 or 3 courses, and then Herb would come in and play this fucking beautiful thing 3 steps away from the written changes, that just would, that's how the first night went, and I was getting pretty
mm.
comfortable by the end of the night. So we're in the last set, and he says, "Mikey, do you know what a difference a day makes?" And I said, "Oh, I think I know Dinah Washington's recording of it, but I never played it." And he goes, "Oh, it's easy. It's in F, 2/5, 2/5." And he just lays down the changes to me, like that.
Mm,
And so I struggle through it and I play my solo. And the next day I'm home and I'm gonna fucking shed that tune. So I
mm,
get that tune down, right? And I got my two-handed Phineas Newborn shit happening on it, and I got my Oscar shit, and I got some block chord stuff, and I'm feeling
mm,
pretty fucking proud of myself. So the second night of the gig, we're in there, and he hasn't called the fucking tune. And it's like 20 to 1, right? And the gig is ending at 1, it's the 9 to 1. And he says to me, Mikey, I've been calling all the tunes. What would you like to play? Now, Mikey could have said a fucking song that he played his entire life, right? I could
right,
have said, "Oh,
yeah,
There'll Be Never Greater Love," or "There'll Never Be Another You," or, some tune that I had played
yeah,
1,000 times. But no, 23-year-old Mikey's gonna say, "How about that tune, What a Difference a Day Made? I had fun playing that last night, Herb." And he goes,
mm,
"Oh, yeah. Okay. 1, 2, G flat."
God,
And I just about cried.
oh my
You know
gosh,
what I mean? I mean,
yeah,
and so I told we got to be very dear friends and played hundreds of gigs together. And I told him
mm.
about it like 10 years later. I said, "Do you remember when we had the first gig?" And I told him the whole story. And I said, "And you went 1, 2, G flat." And he looked at me and he went, "Did I?" You know what I mean? He knew
That's
exactly what he was doing, So, but that kind of shit, it's those guys that I hear in your playing, you know what I mean? Those
Mm,
kind of tradition that is so important to me. I mean, without going into the whole Dave McKenna thing, I heard Dave
mm,
McKenna and he played the piano the way I dreamed of playing the piano my whole life.
mhm,
He's playing a bass line, he's comping and he's soloing and he's doing it while listening to a Red Sox game in his ear, you know, and I fell in love with him. I fell in love with that style, and I said, whatever I do, I don't want that idea to go away. I think that
mhm,
idea
yeah,
is so important, and and he was a guy that came up in the '50s, and two
mhm,
guys. I mean, Errol was older than him, but two guys
mm,
that had completely unique stylistic ideas on the piano.
yeah,
You know,
oh, yeah,
you either went through Nat
mm,
and Tatum and Teddy Wilson and to Oscar and all that, or you
mm,
sort of got into the Wynton Kelly and the Bud Powell and, all that
mm,
those sort of branched off there. But these 2 guys, Errol and Dave, just had a completely unique
man,
sense of what to do. And Dave always said he just did it out of necessity, because he missed what a bass player would be doing. But I mean, Dave was a natural. I mean,
Was was he as self-deprecating as I feel like he is in interviews? Like, he's always like,
Yes.
"I'm a
I
cocktail
mean,
piano player." It's like,
yeah,
"What?"
yeah, yeah. What are you talking about? And I mean, he said to me, I said to him, he goes, well, if the gig at the Copley Club, if I lose that mic, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, Dave, go on the road. I said,
Mhm,
you could go out with Tony Bennett, the two of you. Tony loved
mhm.
Dave and he loved playing, singing with him. And he goes, what if the road dries up? I said, "The road's not gonna dry up for Dave McKenna. You're on
What?
Concord Records. You've got fucking 30." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he's like,
Wow.
but he was very, very humble, and, he always said
Mm.
that he almost in the '60s, he almost stopped playing, and he took the post office test to be a mailman.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I said to him one time, he was very, very complicated guy. He was a
Mm.
bad drinker for most of his career, but he stopped in the early '80s and
Mhm.
saved his life. But he was, Dick Johnson, he watched him talk himself out of 2 albums in one afternoon just because being belligerent in the '50s. One was
My
with
gosh.
strings. ABC wanted to do an album with strings.
Ooh,
And
that'd been so nice.
yeah, and "You don't wanna fucking record me. I'm no good." You know? And, I mean, you would say, Hank O'Neal would call him to do a record at Chiaroscuro. He goes, "I recorded everything I already know."
Wow.
And then he would sit down for an hour and play genius stuff.
Yeah.
So he was a very strange guy, but he was wonderful, but I said to him
Mm.
one time, late at night, I said, I said, "We're talking baseball, Dave." I said, "I'd like to talk about music a little bit." And he said,
Mm.
"Baseball's been a lot better than me music ever has."
Wow.
So, but he was not as doom and gloom, and I think he knew his value as a musician, and,
Mm.
but he downplayed it. He was just a very not condescending, but self-deprecating, as you said. And I mean, it was Frank, his wife said to me one time, he once said to me back in the '80s, he goes, I don't make any money from Concord Records. And his wife was sitting right next to him, Frankie, and she said, the nothing you made last year was $35,000 in royalties. You know? So, I mean, you never knew. I mean, he was making a fortune at the Copley Plaza. They would give him a
Uh,
room, and they were paying him $5,000 a week, and this is in 1983, '82,
my
you know?
gosh.
So, I mean, that was real money. I mean, it's real money now. I'd like to make that,
Yeah. Yeah.
But, so, I mean, but he talked like, everything's okay, but he was such a genius. I mean, you can't get deeper down the hall of Dave than I am. I mean,
Mm.
there's a wonderful website called davemckennapiano.com. Go there and
Will.
check it out. There are hundreds of hours of Dave playing. And
Do you have this or sorry.
no, but I mean, the other thing is like when he got off drinking in the '80s, he did a record called My Friend the Piano,
Mhm.
and it's maybe one of his best solo albums, and he started playing these, like, Bill Evans voicings and this really ruminative stuff that's so hip
Mm.
and so almost ethereal, some of his lines, and I said to him, "Man, Dave, that My Friend the Piano album, man, you were playing so well on that album." He goes, "I was so sick. I was sick to my stomach on that record. I had like a diabetic attack, and I felt like shit, and I just played and got the gig over with."
What?
It's like,
My gosh.
life-changing shit to me that he just,
Yeah.
yeah, and the Maybach album is so great.
Mm.
There's like a
Wow.
whole Maybach record that never came out, like a second night that he did there, that's really great.
Oh.
But anyways.
I recently found a video of him or a video, it was just an audio of him and one of my other favorites, Jimmy Rolls, Late Night
Mm,
at Bradley's, and you can really it's just the audio, but you can really, like, feel the aura in the room. It feels like
right.
it's 3 AM and they're just kinda sitting around and playing tunes
Yeah.
together.
Oh, and Jimmy, man, what a player. Jimmy
Did you
Rolls,
know
just
him?
I did never met him. We're going way over time, but I don't care because I could talk to you
It's
forever.
great.
Um, so tell me what you're up to now.
Yeah, well, so now I've released a few records in the past few months. I'm doing these little EPs with a label called G2 out of Europe. So I'm doing these like little 4-song EPs that come out
Uh-huh.
twice a year, and we just released one, and it's fun. I did this. We did like takes on. I mean, I love a good song, no matter what era it's from. So I took "Surfer Girl" from the Beach Boys, as if
Oh, yeah.
like Fathead Newman would play it. It's just like a 12/8 kind of slow bluesy thing, and we played Love's in Need of Love Today, the Stevie Wonder tune with kind of a
Yeah, yeah.
Poinciana groove, and there's
Oh,
this tune,
nice.
it's called Misty Days, Lonely Nights, which is what Ramsey Lewis retitled Rachmaninoff's Vocalise, that is a really nice tune. So it's just
Yeah,
kinda
yeah.
it's a very random, and then we did this Chet Baker song called, or it's a Don Sebesky tune called You Can Never Go Home Again. It's just a beautiful
Wow.
tune.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. But I've done a few tributes of sorts to Les, and I'm working on
Mhm.
one more with this fantastic guy, producer Larry Klein. He's just brilliant, and we're
Huh.
having a ball. And yeah, I'm just touring a lot, and I recently had a kid, so I'm a
Wow, yeah, I saw
dad
that.
now. Yeah,
Congratulations. Wow.
thank you. Yeah, so
Um,
that's a big thing, and loving being getting to know this little guy. But
yeah.
yeah, no,
What's his name?
just his name is Louis.
No,
Little Lou.
nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. It
Excellent.
didn't, it's not for Louis Armstrong, as people guess,
Right.
but it didn't hurt that,
No.
I feel like between Louis Armstrong, Louis Jordan, and Louis Prima, they're all just
Yeah.
happy music, which
That's
I love
right, that's
that.
right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's wonderful, man.
It's
And,
really special.
and yeah, and you still doing the radio show?
Oh, yeah, yeah, so I have a radio show, yeah, I'm working with it's WABE, it's like Atlanta's NPR affiliate, and,
Mhm.
yeah, I have this once a week radio show. It's been a blast. I get to, have conversations like this, but this is a treat, it's a
Right.
treat, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
do you so you have guests on as
I
well as
do.
just
Yeah, I mean,
excellent.
it's I do sort of like I have guests every once in a while, but and most of the episodes I really just write, like, we'll get into things like the treatment of jazz in Nazi Germany or how jazz was treated in Soviet Union, or I mean, I love
Wow.
really diving into kind of that kind of stuff. It's really fascinating to me.
It's I love that you really, like, you're a scholar
I
on
wanna
it, you
be.
know what I mean? Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, well, that's what a scholar
Yeah.
somebody's working towards.
Yeah.
But, I mean, did it come about what did you study at NYU besides music? I mean, were you thinking about doing something else with your life, or did you wanna be a
No,
musician?
not at all. I was really, I mean, I knew that I've always been someone who I love music. I knew that was what I wanted to do with my life, but I've always been someone who can't be playing music all day long. Like, I need to get away from it so that I can come back to it. And so that's been a big part of. So yeah, for me, truthfully, like I got this. I took that gig at the Blue Note just because I wanted to play piano and meet people that could help me get gigs. And then I realized through doing that I kind of liked some of that work, and it was really a great thing to have as like an antidote to playing music. And then when I moved back to Atlanta, I just kind of fell into some stuff. Like, I like writing, so I've been writing a lot, and that turned into this radio show. And so it's kind of just, I never was really like in college, I was just really interested in the piano. Like, I didn't even know about I didn't know about any of the stuff that I just mentioned to you until I went to Auschwitz a few years ago. And the tour guide said, here's what the orchestra played, which was kind of shocking to hear.
Right,
And then he
right.
said, what kind of music do you think they played? And I said, I bet they played sad music. And he was like, nope. He said, this music was a weapon. They played happy music to fool people
Wow.
and to, drown out the scream and things like that. And that's when I really
Right.
started thinking,
Jesus.
but I've never thought of music as being anything other than just like pleasant. And so to hear music being weaponized, I was like, that is something I didn't even know was possible. I'm going to look into
Right.
that. And I just became so fascinated by it.
Wow,
Man,
wow.
it's
Yeah,
wild stuff.
yeah, I play to drown out the screams, but it's mostly just my audience. Um, but, I, no, I mean, it's really it's great because, again, I keep harping on it, but I don't want jazz to not fade away, but to sort of morph into this generic thing. The stuff that
Mhm.
we like, the stuff that's was so important for the past 50 years, 60, 70, 80 years now. I mean, I'm dating myself, but, these stories need to be told, you know?
Totally.
Well, the other thing I just wanted to compliment you on was your genius of going to the Blue Note to get a freaking gig. I mean,
No,
that's
thanks.
really, I mean, that would have never occurred to me, even in Boston to go to like, one of the jazz rooms and say, "Hey, I could work in the
Mm.
office." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well
It's a
I can't take all the but NYU had, like, an internship program, and honestly, the first place I wanted to go to was Verve Records, and then they told me when I went to the interview that I would probably not meet any of the artists on the label, and then I thought, "Why do I wanna do this?" And then I thought, "The Blue Note, that the artists are there every day. Why
yeah,
not?"
exactly.
Yeah,
Very smart. So NYU did that. I mean, they offered
they
that.
did.
That's hip. Wow.
Yeah, that was
Um,
great, really. And you mentioned Clark Terry, I just can't resist asking really quick if you don't mind, but my teacher at NYU was one of the greatest people I've ever met, and he spent a lot of time with Clark Terry. It was Don Friedman. I don't know if you ever knew
oh, yeah,
Don Fried.
Don. I love
Uh,
Don. We were dear
he was
friends on a bunch of the cruises.
he
Um,
was the
it was amazing. I mean, he was I was out walking the deck of the Norway, and there's Don coming by doing his run. You know, he
he
was
was great.
jogging around the decks.
And I used to hang out with Jimmy Heath. He lived in Atlanta, and we were talking about Don. And Jimmy said that on one of the cruises, he went to go hear Don play a solo concert, and Don
Mhm.
knew that Jimmy couldn't swim, and Don immediately launched into "How Deep Is the Ocean."
Wow.
I
Yeah,
just loved that.
Don was on I think he was on with Clark. He was
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
with
he
Clark
played with
on
him
that
for
cruise. Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He told me one of the cruises where Oscar sat in with them or something. I don't know if you were there
Yeah,
for that,
that
but
was the
yeah.
one that was the QE2 cruise. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
man,
yeah, that was great. I
man.
mean, those cruises were amazing, and I've talked way too much about myself and shit on this, but I never
No,
get to
this is
talk to
awesome.
you.
We can talk anytime, yeah. But
But, but yeah, those some of those, those are things that'll stay with me forever. So anyhow, is your family in Atlanta? I mean,
yeah, after
obviously, your
it's
wife and
yeah,
kid, yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
your whole family still there?
Yeah, both sides of my family's kind of been here for like 4 generations or so on both sides, and
Geez,
so we have a big family. My grandpa had like 9 brothers, and they were all Altermans, so there's a lot of us, and,
wow.
my wife's family's from here too. They live really nearby, and, both families get along very well. It's great.
Well, that's unusual. No, it's very good.
Yeah.
And I don't know Atlanta at all. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
there is a good music scene there,
Mm.
but I mean, I've been to the airport, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like an old city that's it's also kinda brand new in a lot of ways. A lot when I moved back here after being in New York, it was kind of like coming home to a new town. But anyway, I feel
Really?
like yeah, I mean, because there's just so much development and so much,
Mhm.
I feel like Atlanta, people live basically in like Macon, Georgia or Birmingham and say they're from Atlanta. That's how far like the suburbs go these days.
Right, right,
But I feel like Atlanta in a lot of ways it's great for musicians who like me are kind of like do kind of more leader kind of stuff where like you go get you gotta find the opportunities versus like I mean a lot of times when I lived in New York I really it was nice people say you need to play here you need to play here you need to call
right.
this it was kind of like a blueprint in a lot of ways there's definitely no blueprint here but I really enjoy kind of seeing where I can make things
Sure.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the cost of living is a little lower, probably.
that's a little yeah.
Well, so what years were you in New York? I'm just trying to
I was there,
frame this.
yeah, 2007 to 2016.
Jesus, I didn't know that's a long time.
Yeah, I was like in college and stuff. I wasn't really
Yeah, yeah.
playing them. Yeah,
It's well, I mean, New York changed a lot in those years too.
yeah.
I mean, I left there in '99, and we went back in 2015 to play uh, on Broadway, and I hadn't been
Mm,
there in 15 years,
my
and it was like a
gosh.
new it was like a new city. I mean, it was totally
Yeah.
different. Places I
Wow. That
wouldn't have
really
gone
was like
near.
a new city. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, neighborhoods you wouldn't go near when I lived there are now
Mm.
all gentrified and super high end. A
Yeah,
Hell's
yeah.
Kitchen in the '80s, you wouldn't go there. In the '80s, you wouldn't drive through it. It was too dangerous
Mm.
to drive through, and now it's like,
Wow.
$5,000 a month apartments for a studio.
Yeah.
But, well, you should come out to Vegas and can see the Penn and Teller show.
I would love to. I'd love to meet you. Yeah, I'm so happy to yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely it seems like we're gonna hang at some point because
We must.
it's important. I just love everything you're doing, and I'm so happy that you're keeping everything going and that, everything's in good hands. Um, and it's really, yeah, it's been wonderful. I'm gonna wrap it up. I think we got more than enough stuff,
Yeah.
and if we cut out the me talking about myself part,
Hey, it's great.